I will be speaking about one of the most important projects of my practice, Birkha Bawari, which is a recently built step well in Jodhpur. Jodhpur is famous for two things, the local sandstone and water, or the lack of it. The commonality between the two is that both are indestructible, and the gaping disparity between the two is that while stone is available in abundance, water is an acutely scarce resource over there. So this project is about bringing together of the abundant and the scarce, bringing together of two indestructibles to create lasting architecture and managing their contrast to balance the disparity. Birkha Bawari, however, cannot be viewed in isolation. You just can't see this project that it started suddenly and that will not go on. There's a whole historical context behind it. And I can never speak about Birkha Bawari without talking about the water heritage, where it comes from and why it has been built. The heritage about water somehow in the last century was kind of put into abeyance. And this Birkha Bawari is a small attempt to kind of kickstart it again. My talk is about perpetuating the rich legacy of water heritage by contemporizing the traditional water architecture by way of its regeneration, iteration, and its mainstreaming. This is an inscribed pillar, stone pillar, often installed near water bodies. It is one of the most sacred symbols of water buildings. It also indicates that now here is a water body. You have to have a lot of reverence. You cannot even step over there without taking off your footwear. And if you do that, it would invoke social rebuke. So this talk is also about the efforts at securing the honor of such sacred pillars. The presentation has been divided broadly into three parts. The first is very briefly about the physical condition of urban water heritage and their standing in the prevalent water infrastructure, about the transition from being sustainable to going into a state of suspension. And the second part is about contemporizing the water heritage by way of regeneration of the dormant and abandoned ancient water buildings and their mainstreaming. It took me a lot of effort to compress the whole thing in 20 minutes, but I hope I'll be able to do some justice because there's a lot of historical context behind it. The third and the final section is about contemporization by way of iteration, by way of creating more of such water bodies and continuing their heritage, demonstrated through a newly constructed water body, Birkha Bawari, of which I'll be speaking about. So the first section is purely contextual. To best exemplify the water heritage, I will take Jodhpur as a microcosm of the entire country. The historic city lies on the rain shadow of this Aravalli range, and because it's in the rain shadow, you don't receive enough. In fact, the entire Thar, part of which is in Pakistan, does not receive enough rainfall. And because there is so much lack of water, it is the astute ingenuity of our ancestors that they created basins to harness water wherever it fell. It is also an ideal case as it offers you see the temperatures go up to 48 degrees. The average rainfall is very, very low. It varies from, say, about, for instance, in Jodhpur, it's just 300 mm. And when you go further west, it further reduces to 100 mm only. And there are, hot winds. So there's not enough water. If I take this as an example, it becomes an ideal case in how we have worked our way around it. With the city plan superimposed. The city is known to have over 400 water bodies, which are built, the last one may have been built in, I think, 19th century or early 20th century. There is an entire gamut of water bodies from natural lakes to man-made. You have these larger stretches, which are the natural lakes. So these are the hillocks from where the water goes and gets collected into these. These are then brought into the city, into the man-made water bodies. You'll see a lot of blue dots over here. So there are, these are the primary water bodies, then they go to the secondary water bodies and finally to the smaller well. I'll quickly go through this because we don't have enough time. So the larger surface water bodies, the natural lakes, these were the primary sources. Almost invariably you would have a royal building or a temple, something, because this would be under state control. So because this is the primary source of water, natural rain, every drop which drains into it. Then next in the hierarchy would be, man-made large tanks. This is a Gulab Sagar tank which was built in 1788. And the picture shows how the fabric of a very tightly packed, dense town is punctured by these aqua parks, creating a very picturesque scene. In an extremely hot and arid region, these water body buildings provided respite from heat and dryness, transforming the ecology and microenvironment, making the place more livable. Then, you would have these subterranean water bodies, a very simple well, which you'll find all over India, all over the world. And then you start getting the variants of it, a step well becomes a jhalara. So you can see beautiful steps going down. When the water recedes, you go down and fetch water, and water increases you. And then these steps are also used. You can go and sit there. And there's a very good geometry and technique that when you're fetching water, you're carrying water on your shoulder. You can keep the vessel on the next one and then climb very comfortably. But most important than anything else is that this is not just a well. It has now become a social and a community building. People can come and sit here, spend their time. Because in those days, we did not have enough places to go out to. We did not even have so much transportation. And in a desert city, you can't have very large parks where you can go and park. And the more elaborate ones were the linear ones. These were the linear wells. You have steps going down into water. Water these days sometimes rise all the way up here. Now, these are very, very interesting water bodies compared to square step wells, which I showed you in the previous slide. These were far more in number, and majority were built by philanthropists and many by women. Now, this is one of the sketch, we were just conserving one step well, so we were trying to recreate what it must have originally been, because it's in a very bad stage. The architecture of the Bawris was such that the underground pavilions and chambers in the flanking walls were designed to be used by women to gather for social interaction in the cool privacy, away from the gaze of men in scorching sun. So in summation, what you have, this site shows natural water bodies where the rainwater is connected, then through canals it is taken to the tertiary water bodies. From here they leak through aquifers, they leak into these wells, various kinds of wells, and the overflow then goes into a seasonal river. And every drop we try to collect, even from the rooftop, you have these spouts and there is a tanka under there. So you have from macro to micro, you collect as much water as possible, every drop of rain. And until over a century ago, these on-site indigenous water bodies were the principal sources of water in the city. And except during extended periods of drought, they kept Jodhpur water positive. Despite having a great wealth of ancient water structures, the city today stands water impoverished. Unfortunately, with the afflictions of changing times, the legacy of water heritage got lost in the din of lopsided development that is the bane of modern India. The huge repository of traditional water bodies managed by communities with a participatory and democratic approach was relegated in favor of centralized state-controlled modern water infrastructure. And we all know that these have proved to be very, very insufficient for the burgeoning population that we have. Post-independence, the state took over the ancient water bodies from the communities without accountability. Now, there are what I define as 3 C's. C's is as an alphabet, which have pushed these water buildings into dormancy. The first C is the carelessness on part of the state, with which these lovely water buildings have been abandoned and are now in a shambles. Defunct and forgotten. There is such a lovely step well in a place called Osia near Jodhpur. You see the vegetation growth and all, and it has beautiful architecture. It has so many different ways of fetching water. The second C is the state's complacence when these were desecrated and encroached upon. These are lying here, but the state is not bothered. They're letting people litter into it. They have installed, electrical poles, etc. over here. So they've kind of shut their eyes, and they've just been complicit in letting these rot. And the third C is the government's complicity in destruction process. Catchment area, a mining area, where they've given out mining leases to people without any thought to what is going to happen to the catchment area. They've been complicit in doing that. And some of the catchment areas have been destroyed beyond salvage now. Now, this is one of the historic Bawris. What were once temples to water have become tombs of water, literally and figurative. And the sad story of Jodhpur exemplifies what is happening to the ancient water bodies, ancient water heritage of the entire country. You can see this is data from World Water Resources. 50% of India faces high to extremely high water stress. 50% of India's groundwater wells are decreasing. In fact, India has the highest extraction of groundwater, and there are 100 million people live in areas of poor water quality. And this despite all of us having such a lovely you will see brick masonry, and where I think this is the only old building in Jodhpur where you will see brick masonry. So all the plaster had come off. So we started replastering using kitchen recipes. We go to Google methi and pure lime that we were using, and we gradually started restoring this. There were a lot of जैसे कहते हैं घोंसले बहुत बन गए थे, birds बहुत थी. So the bird and the nest housed in this Bawri have been moved to another place without causing any harm to them. This is yet another one, among the many interesting ones, and it was again a very successful work. This is called Jadichi Jhalara, which was built in 1718, and we restored it after almost 300 years, and we dedicated it to the public in 2019. So this is a sketch reimagining the original form of Jadichi Jhalara, hoping to free it from all encroachments. You see, there are a lot of encroachments which have happened over here on this side and all. So we were just trying to reimagine what it must have been. And this is the sketch that we created. The picture on the left shows it fraught with deep vegetation growth and structural damage. On the right is the picture after this was conserved and restored in July 2019. The idea is to mainstream its water to the city network and reactivate it as a neighborhood community space. Revived and returned to the community, these historic water buildings are becoming active socio-cultural spaces that would ensure their sustainability and upkeep. So if you have to ensure that they are properly sustained and they are maintained, you have to connect the society with these. Their successful regeneration clearly proves that even after being in dormancy for over a century and being in a state of grave dilapidation, these have the potential to bounce back to life. Water bodies, old and new, are always timeless. They have to be rejuvenated, innovated upon, and created from time to time so that heritage is continuously built with every new creation. From the time Jodhpur was primarily dependent on on-site local water resources to now, the population has increased manyfold. I mean, at the end of 19th century, it must have been less than 1 lakh, and now today we are over 15 lakhs. So, I mean, just reviving the old water bodies is not going to suffice. So we have to keep adding new ones and collect the local water, the rain that falls on a land. The third and final part of this presentation is about perpetuating the water heritage by way of iteration and by creating new ones. And this brings us to Birkha Bawri, completed in 2009. To my reckoning, this kind of water building has been built after over a century and quarter of the last traditional water building built anywhere in India. The project is an initiative to reassure the golden era of water harvesting structures and hopefully see it emulated and perpetuated into the future. This is a Google image of one of the hills where you have the famous Umaid Palace. At the foothills of this is about 400 bighas of land, which are almost 2 kilometers long, which had been selected for developing a housing township. And in its lowermost portion is where we put our Bawri. The contours of the hillock offered very good catchment. Water from all this could come into this area. This is on the lower part. This is an image of the site when work had just been initiated. A barren landscape on a red sandstone hill, craggy and undulating. To make it an environmentally viable venture, it was imperative to create a dense green cover and ensure continuous supply of water for its sustenance. But the state does not have water to give to us. So what do? That is when we invoked the ancient wisdom, and we thought that what they were doing, our ancients were doing in the past, let's start doing that again. And that's where the idea of creating a new Bawri germinated. And I'm very grateful to the builder. Normally builders would want to use every inch of space to eke money, but here was one guy who was sensitive enough. He was from Bombay and he was sensitive enough to have consented to this. The site of Umaid is 110-acre site. I mean, this whole master plan was done by Mr. U.C. Jain, and he had put about 7 gardens in the central core. The lowermost over here, garden we converted into Bawri. So this was a small, a narrow piece of land. So you have water coming in from all direction into this, and we collect it over here. And the rainwater which we are harvesting over here, about 17.5 million liters of rainwater, is being used to irrigate 15 acres of lush green parks and roadside plantation. It is an all stone subterranean building for conserving. Naturally we cannot conserve all water, but some of it we are conserving. We are conserving about 17.5 million liters of water. Now, even though it is a recently built project, it could well be classified as a conservation project. For in its making, it involves conservation of many sorts. Conservation of the old tradition of building in load-bearing stone, preservation of construction practices typical to Jodhpur sandstone, and also conservation of the habit and concept of harvesting rainwater. And by making these conservation issues concurrent and inherent with the new construction, they get perpetuated into the contemporary and hopefully into the future. The success of this project is highly significant as it exemplifies that such large local water bodies are still feasible and architecturally and financially viable. This massive subterranean structure is about 235 meters long, about 12 meters on an average it is wide. It descends about 5 stories below earth. From the ground level almost about 55-60 feet. There are sluice walls on either side. When you have the first flush of rains, we would close the sluice wall so that the debris that comes with rainwater is, we'll just let it pass and only clean water comes in. Of course, we still have to install a very natural filter. The builder has almost done his work and gone, but we are looking for people who can help us do this. These are arcuated walls, and I was inspired from the vaults that you see. I've just appended those vaults and pitched them against each other with tributed frames. So this wall is holding this wall, and a series of such arcuated walls we have created these basins. If you talk about the architecture, it is truly indigenous. What happens is that was the first picture I showed. It was a hillock, so we had to cut the hill to get all our infrastructure, to get our roads, to make level plots and all. So this was the stone which, if we had disposed, it would have been at a cost and it would have created a carbon footprint. So this is the stone that we have used in making the Bawri. So it's not only local, it's like on the site. The stone for masonry frames were hand processed on site. So we did not use energy guzzling machinery at all. And most of the work from extraction of stone to masonry was done by local masons. You know, some of them, for instance, the people who are picking up the stone, these are called chavaliyas in local language. So this whole breed is becoming extinct now because we have lifts, we have cranes to pick stone, but we use them here. And in any case, in any subterranean structure, it's very difficult to use a crane. The residue, waste, scrap of stone and chips born of the process in sizing and shaping stone was used as heartings, as infills, as concrete. So in a way, we completely used we did not generate too much waste. And the large volume of excavated earth for creating this massive subterranean structure was utilized in reclaiming the undulations, making, plains of the plots, which were very steep contours. So with the overburden waste of the site so completely utilized, the scrap generated in processing stone completely consumed in construction, and the excavated earth used for reclamation, a fine geological balance was achieved in making of this Bawri. This is an aerial picture. So you have an ingress over here, you have ingress over there. So water comes in from either side, and it comes with gravity, and in drawing water is the only place where we are using electricity, but we are generating enough solar electricity on the site to call it near zero energy project. I will give you a quick tour of the completed project and then end my talk. This is the entrance to the Bawri. As contemporary as it is traditional, the forecourt in form of a jhalra occupies the foreground. Its magnificence starts revealing itself as one descends. This is the two-storied pavilion marking the transition between the step pond and the step well. Normally you would see that either it's a linear step well or it's a jhalra step pond. This is a fusion of both. As one gets closer, the tributed frames, these you will find in Rani Ki Vav and others also, these kind of frames. So you're standing on this end and you can see the inlets on the other side. These frames are offering a binocular view of the perforations on the other side of the inlets. Most of the stone used is rock-faced or rough-hewn, contrasting the rawness of stone with strict geometry. The descent into the earth offers varying experiences of light and shadow through varying frames of beams and columns. The columnar frames that enclose the volume at the end of the arcuated walls, you have two arcuated walls, they come and converge on this, and you have two pavilions here, one is here and one out at the top. This is a pavilion which connects from one end to the other. You can climb down to this pavilion. This is the highest water level. You can almost be next to water. These are the inspirations we have drawn from traditional water bodies where you have a lot of pavilions. As you descend deeper, shadows deepen, outside noises muffle, and echoes amplify. This is a very rare thing because now there's water all the time, but only when it recedes, you can actually go down and experience this. The elements have retained their naturalness, and the geometry choreographed through the design makes up for the intricate lattice work which is typical to ancient water architecture. As one goes deeper into the earth, diverse shapes of sky is offered through each varying frame. While the beam and column frame silhouettes the sky in a rectangle, the arcuated walls frame the sky in a parenthesis, just a bracket mein hota hai. And the final circular bay frames a telescopic view of the sky, kind of reaching out to it while simultaneously drawing the sun to light up its cavern. True to the tradition, the stepwell has been developed to serve as a public space also, with a meandering promenade all around. Once you have gone from there and here, almost 0.5 kilometers you will have done. The Bawri is also a community space for people to gather and celebrate, contemporizing the socio-cultural ethos of the intimate connect that the community had with the vernacular water buildings. On this 24th December, they're going to have a dance recital in this Bawri. This is the original picture which I had shown you, absolutely barren, and then we introduced this Bawri, and this is the after picture. It bears testimony to the environmental and ecological transformation such projects can effect from barren to lush green. The creation of this 21st century stepwell demonstrates that such indigenous water bodies are still viable, they are relevant, you still need them, and it is possible to build them. To expand the water heritage of India, it is essential that the governments mandate creation of on-site water bodies in existing and new neighborhoods. And equally important is to integrate this discipline in architecture and planning curricula. This is a traditional folk painting depicting the ecosystem of the Great Indian Desert, an inclusive environment with water at the core. You can see, it kind of offers water to flora, fauna and human being, everybody. And this is what the traditional water bodies used to do. I close with the hope that the governments and the communities of the world work in tandem to recreate such livable environments fit for a harmonious and balanced coexistence of flora, fauna and human beings.
Sir, I think mesmerizing, sir.
Thank you.
and and you know, we have been always talking, especially architects from Rajasthan, you know, about preserving, conserving Bawri. You know, for the first time, we have seen that how a new Bawri has been erected in the present era. Kudos to you, sir.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Now, sir, my question to you is this, you know, since most of us are working for developers, you know, when we are doing big time township, you know, I think you were very fortunate enough.
Yes, you're right.
To get the, you know, positive side of the developer, that he allows you to create a Bawri, understand the sanctity of a Bawri, you know. And since the Mother Earth
In
has
fact,
given
I'll be
us
eternally
water,
grateful to him.
sir,
Yeah.
I really wanted to understand what was exact driving force, you know, which actually can lead us on the same line, sir.
Sorry?
What was the exact driving force which persuaded that developer, you know, to follow your design, sir?
See, the thing is, I'll tell you, the developer was well aware that he will never be able to get that kind of water. He did not want to leave behind a township where he has promised so much verdure, where he has promised so much greenery, and then he just lets it languish. And, you know, I mean, he was from the breed of, you know, the sensitive builders. But I'll tell you the commercial angle about it. It's a very interesting story. That when we did this, I tried to tell many people that why do you not do it? It doesn't cost so much. You know, most of the stone was extracted from site, so there was no cost to it. But the notional cost is about 7 crores, which comes to about 5 rupees a litre, not more than that. Now, if one understands that, one would readily do that. But when they see the scale of this, they always think, ye to nahi possible hai. But how it has helped the builder is, in 10 years' time, his cost per yard went up from 5,000 to 50,000. You see? And that's a driving enough force for anybody. He may have understood this later, but now it's a lesson for everybody to emulate.
Did you undergo some calculations, like what was the amount of surface water was collected and how much you were able to reuse it? So was there any water balancing chart?
Yes, of course. And that is the reason why, I mean, it is a very designed kind of an effort, because we have stormwater drains on either side. So we know that, you know, there are freakish rains also. So that would bring in a lot of water, but that overflows, fine. I mean, however much we can collect, we can collect. We can't go beyond this. Now, you see, there's a difference between this and step wells. Step wells are taking water from the aquifers. Here we are taking water from the earth, from the sky, what falls over here. I could have dug further below. But if I were to do that, I would have touched some aquifer, and a weak aquifer, and my water would have leaked there. So instead of getting water from that aquifer, I would have in fact passed on my water over there. And that's the reason we stopped short. Thank you.